Hey, what's going on, everyone? In this episode, I'm talking about what's the purpose of your brand story, okay? So you've painstakingly sat down, maybe with your team, maybe just like over a meeting or several meetings, crafted your brand story. To what end, right? Was all that work, was all that exertion for the sole purpose of printing out a statement that's not even a story and then putting it on your website, right, on your About Us page, or maybe a handout that you give to new employees or new visitors or new prospects, right? Was that the whole purpose? What do you do with your brand story after you have it? So I want to talk about like 3 different ways that you should actually be using your brand story once you've crafted your brand story. If you want a deep dive into just your overall architecture of your brand story, your brand story framework, I covered that extensively in episode 1. What is brand storytelling? I talk about the 2 different stories that actually comprise your brand story. You've got your authentic purpose story and your marketplace story. This is just a different way of saying you have your mission story, and then you have your customer story. So it's the value, your customer story is the value that you add to your customers. Once you figure out this story, you understand how to, I'm getting ahead of myself, but you understand like that's basically the structure of your customer testimonial. It's the structure of your customer language. But in addition to that, is you have your mission story. And this is the story journey that your company is on. It's the impact that your organization is out to make in the world. And that ultimately is the story that you're inviting your customers into, right? To just give you a sort of like story analogy here, Frodo, or rather Bilbo, right, is just going about living his life without a care in the world. He has his own story. He has his own trajectory, his own path. Gandalf is caught in this greater conflict, okay, this conflict with Sauron, and he invites Bilbo into this greater journey. So suddenly Bilbo's life, it's disrupted, right? He goes on a little quest and everything, but there's still this greater conflict brewing in the background, right? So that's just what I mean of like your company is focused on doing something bigger. So that's the importance of your authentic purpose, why you started the company, your origin story, but really what you're communicating is the mark you hope to make on the world through your business. And then you've got your marketplace story, which is the value that you're adding into the marketplace. But once you figure those things out, what do you do with it? Like how do you put these things to use? So there's 3 ways that understanding, knowing your brand story, and then understanding it adds value to your organization and how you can start to put it into the use. So that way you can strengthen your brand and actually achieve the mission that you're setting out to achieve. You can help more people. You can make a significant mark on the world with a stronger brand, okay? Now, the first thing that your brand story gives to you is perspective. A better perspective about your customer and how they view your organization. And I feel like this is the biggest value add that a brand story gives is perspective. And the reason for that is we are all suffering from the disease. We're all suffering from the curse of expertise. We're all too close to our own thing. And it then becomes extremely difficult to see our organization with fresh eyes, to see it from the outside in, to see it from our customer's perspective, right? I'm going to use the term customer. I mean client, volunteer, donor, all of these things, target audience, right? But it becomes extremely difficult to see it from their perspective because we're in it. I've heard it mentioned that we're inside the pickle jar hoping to read the label from inside of the pickle jar. It becomes impossible unless you're using stories, because stories have this very unique ability, almost like this magical power, to transport us into the shoes of the main character. It's called narrative transportation, right? And I've got a video about that if you want to check that out on the YouTube channel. But stories have this very unique ability to transport us as the audience of the story into the life experience of the protagonist, of the main character, right? And we're able to experience the story from them. They become the vehicle through which we experience the story. They're the window into the story world. They're our pair of eyes, ears, and feet, right? And you can think about this in a sense of a story is essentially a ride that we're going on. The main character is the car that we're sitting within as we're going on this journey, as we're going on this ride, okay? And that is awesome because the immediate thing it helps us understand is it kicks us out of our insulated view. It helps us realize that like the world of our business, the world of our company is bigger than the world of our company. That we're constantly talking to another person who is living about their life in their own way, just with their own cares, with their own concerns. And very often they don't match up with our cares and our concerns. In fact, they would surprise us what they're actually concerned about. My wife and I read a book recently. Well, we listened to it. It was read to us in the car. But we were listening to this book, and it was talking about how this it was about marketing and how they this guy was working. I think it was potentially Alan Weiss. He was consulting this airplane company about how to actually promote their airplanes, right? And they had just released this new airplane, and they were like super proud of it and really wanting to just get a lot of build a lot of hype for it. And when they did research about the customers could care less about the daggum airplane. What they cared most about was the on-flight meals. So they ran an ad promoting the on-flight meals, right? It's like the things that we think are super important, that people are just going to get all nerded out and stoked about, they could care less. That's the first value of understanding the brand story, is because as you're shaping this brand story, you're shaping this character of your customer. And by placing them inside of a story, it's really forcing you to flesh them out fully, to not just look at them as this bleak demographic sketch, right? Which honestly is quite an insulting kind of assessment of what a person is. You know, like you have to make a lot of assumptions as to who this person is based on their ethnicity, gender, age, economic status, right? I mean, like you might be able to make semi-accurate assumptions, but they're kind of offensive assumptions. You really need to like dig into who is this person? What are they like? What do they care about? What problem are they facing? How is this problem affecting them externally, internally? What does that do to their sense of self, to their identity, right? Like there's things that happen in my work that are seemingly insignificant. Maybe even it's just a sentence of what someone says, and that sentence will keep me up at night. I will lose sleep from that. I will have an existential crisis because of a single sentence that someone tells me, okay? But you'll lose that level of depth and that level of understanding if you're just building a demographic sketch. Demographics have their place. They're great for targeting ads, right? Like you're not going to get your story in front of your customer unless you have a really clear understanding of their demographics, but you got to go deeper. It's about intent, being intentional, crafting this character so that way you are shaping a story that is well told. And then the other important character that you're crafting is your own character. Within their story world, how do they see you? Or rather, how do they need to see you? Because once you understand their story, you can then leverage archetypes to start to get a sense of like, as they're going through this experience, what does it feel like to them, and who are they hoping will show up? A lot of our life experience is actually anchored on archetypes, on myths that we're playing out and living out because we're expecting that stuff to happen, right? So just like being armed with that helps you, one, to have a deeper understanding of your customer. It's truly going to start making your brand, your organization, your company customer-centric, right? Which, I mean, that's why I say it's the most biggest value, because once you become truly customer-centric, all the other ones just easily start to fall into place. But then you also understand how you need to approach this person with what level of care or level of force, right? Level of intensity, level of enthusiasm, what level of intellect, right? Like all of these different things are going to be informed by your brand story. The other thing is it's a strategy. This was mind-blowing when I realized that stories were a strategic framework underneath everything. And it like totally changed how I go about life, how I go about just life in general. So let's just talk about life in general. Life itself is a massive story that we're living out, right? Like it's full of drama. It's full of conflict. It's full of life. It's full of death. There's victory and there's sadness, right? Like it is a massive story that we're living through. And in order for us to make sense of life, we frame life through the lens of stories. They're a sort of shortcut of how we process information that happens to us, right? And it's how we create meaning. It's how we add value, right? Like what's the point of a family heirloom, like if not the story behind it that gives it significance, that gives it meaning. And so if you want to learn more about that, I talk about how stories add meaning. I forget what episode number that is. Put it in the show notes. Pop up a link right here. But stories are essentially a framework for how we experience life. But I even started to understand that, like, not just is it our life experience, right? It's even our personal identity. We have a personal narrative, right? Our identity is a personal narrative. It is a story where we're the central character, and our whole understanding of who we are is based on that story. We relate to other people through the stories we tell. We form friendships with them. We also then understand the strength of that friendship depending upon how we frame their meaning and their relationship to our character within our story, right? So stories create, in a sense, friendships. The structure of our understanding of our friendships is a story, right? But even like, I remember I was sitting in a meeting once, and I understood that the meeting itself was following a story arc, that there was an immediate, so if you think about like sitting in a meeting and then kind of imagine a story that's running in parallel to it, there's the immediate sort of like, you have the lull, right? You're trying to build context. You have this this sort of like banter back and forth, but there's a still time as you're beginning to rev up, right? And then finally you get into what you're doing, and then the energy starts to really ramp up. You might hit a problem that you have to tackle together, right? And then so there's some sort of jostling power dynamic that often happens as you're trying to tackle the problem, because you can't come up with the solution if the leader in the room doesn't like the fact that other people come up with solutions, right? You understand, like, there's power dynamics within meetings, let's be honest, okay? And so that starts to play out in a very interesting, collaborative, productive drama, okay? And then as you get to the end of the meeting, things start to taper off again. You say your goodbyes, the energy leaves, and then it closes out. That's a daggum story, right? Like that itself follows a story arc where you have like this anticipation, right? Then everyone's called to action. Then there's this giant battle, and then there's the resolution and the return back to your lives. Okay? Like, stories are a strategic framework, but how you can actually start to put your brand story into practice is that it's not just this sentence that you print off and you post on your website or you post on a handout. Like, you can start seeing story as a strategic framework for your brand. Like when I talked about it, the perspective, how does your customer expect you to show up? How does that now impact your brand voice, your tone, your look, your color palette, your fonts that you use, the visual indicators, right, that are going to trigger your brand meaning in the mind of your customer? How is that informed as you're going forward? And then thinking through, like I mentioned earlier, structuring your website, but more so, you can use story to structure an entire marketing funnel, because now that you understand your customer's journey and you've become a student of your customer, and so you're refining your understanding of your customer's journey more and more and more, you understand like how to insert yourself into their story and call them to adventure, to show up unannounced, yet not as an interruption, but as an invitation. And now you can design an entire funnel that feels natural, awesome, meaningful to them, and draw them through into your organization. You can use story as a way of mapping your content pieces, your evergreen content pieces, because now that you understand their story, you can map the appropriate content pieces. You can build out an annual content strategy based on a story, based on the story of your customer and how they move through the year and what they experience through that year, through their work and their emotions that they go on through the year. Like, you can use that to inform your entire content strategy. The third thing is tactical, because what I wanted to go into right there was then shape your copywriting. Now that you understand this story, it becomes a framework for your copy, right? It becomes like a way of helping to invite them into your world, talk about the problem that they're facing, remind them of the problem. You know, you could do the PAS formula where you remind them of the problem. You have them feel that again. You demonstrate that you understand it, that you're the best person to solve this for them, and then you show them the solution, because now that you've created that emotional delta, the solution feels amazing, right? Or instead of a problem, agitation, solution, you could do the inspire, promise, and then invite, right? Where you're inspiring them, you're getting them excited about the transformation because you understand the transformative journey that they're on. So you remind them about their transformation. You get them inspired, right? Because now that you understand how you need to show up, you can craft language that is inspiring, right? That reminds them of the success that they're after, that reminds them of, like why they're doing this in the first place. Get them inspired about the transformation, and then invite them to join you. Like, this is a way of then understanding how to shape these things. In your marketplace story, as I said in the beginning, it's essentially a customer testimonial framework, right? Like, once you've figured out your marketplace story, you just tell that story on repeat. Like, that's the framework that your case studies follow. That's the framework that your testimonials follow. That's the framework that your employee stories follow if you are hoping to hire new people or recruit new volunteers, right? Like, that's the thing. And then you can use your framework for your mission stories. So obviously you can structure all of the copy on your website. You can structure the flow of your website, structure flow of funnels, structure the copy inside of ads. Like, this entire thing, right? It becomes a framework and a structure to essentially just like make it easy on you. Now that you did all the work to figure out your framework, to figure out your story, It should streamline everything tactically for you, because now you've got a repeatable structure that you just do. You've essentially created a template designed for the purpose of captivating your audience and deepening the connection between your brand and them. So that's how you put your brand story to use. The value it actually adds is perspective shift, making you fully customer-centric. Strategic, helps you understand how to actually design and map your content and design funnels and just design entire content strategies that are relevant and meaningful to your customer. And then tactical within your messaging, your copywriting, story structures, all of that stuff. So hope this was helpful to you. Hope that will encourage you to actually start putting your brand story into place. If you need any assistance putting your brand story into place, you can always reach me on Instagram at Storytelligent, also on Twitter at Storytelligent, or send me a message on my website, McNabbstorytelling.com. And I will see you in the next one. Take care.